everyone, welcome to E-commerce Straight Talk, where we talk about all things e-commerce. I'm Sam Sprague, and here today we have Jonah Redel-Traub. He's the director of e-commerce for Summit Golf Brands. Jonah, how's life, man?
It's good. It's definitely like a summer slow period right now, which definitely impacts my day-to-day mood, but things are going well.
Yeah. Have you had any time to check out the Olympics?
Yeah. So, I've been popping in here and there. I've been watching the basketball. I watched the US work Iran last night. I watched some gymnastics with my fiance, some swimming.
Yeah. Well, I've been watching the men's basketball too, especially since I'm here in Oregon, so huge Damian Lillard fan. And trying to see
if he's gonna ask for a trade.
Oh, like if I were him or if I worked with him, I'd be like, yeah, we should definitely do that. But I think he wants to build a team here. Like, I think when it comes down to a lot of these guys, it's ego, right? And I think he definitely sees himself as the leader of the team. I don't think he wants to be a number two somewhere else. So, but at the end of the day,
what do you think about a CJ McCollum for Ben Simmons trade and pairing Simmons and Dame?
I thought we should have traded CJ like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Not that, CJ will never listen to this podcast, but
Shit, should we start a basketball pod?
He's already got his own. CJ does. Yeah. But yeah, because the problem is CJ and Dame are too much of the same person, right? And so it just doesn't work. But I was hoping that the Clippers would get ousted in first round by the Mavericks, so that way maybe we could trade for Paul George. But I don't know if Dame and Paul George would actually play together, especially what happened a couple of years ago. But I would be totally up for Ben Simmons trade. Like, hey, let's focus more on defense instead of what we've been doing. I don't know, just anything really. They just have to do something. Yeah. And so it's interesting. But with even watching the Olympics, it seems like there's definitely more parity with all these other countries starting to win gold, which I like. I think it's cool. When you look at total medal count, it's like the US holds like over 1,000 medals, China has 500, and then it's everyone else. And finally you have like the Philippines got one, Tunisia got one. Like it's kind of cool to see that. And basketball in particular, I don't know, just because number one, it just doesn't seem like the US men's team has any fire in them. But you look at like France and Spain and these European countries that have fully loaded NBA rosters too. So it's interesting. But so, talking about sports and then, getting into golf, how has this summer been? Because I know, you and I spoke before and we talked about, the past year and the pandemic and really seeing a lot of these extracurriculars sort of get put on pause. But how has golf been treated over the past year and a half?
Yeah, so golf, I think in 2020, and I may be misquoting the stat, but it's what I have in my head, so I'm just going to go with it. There were more rounds of golf played during 2020 than like any other year previous. So, golf, because it was like an outdoor socially distanced thing, exploded in popularity. And, because like the pro shop scene at a lot of courses was altered, golf e-commerce really sort of exploded. So last year was a huge high. And this year, the wholesale business is having a record year. The ecom business is still doing pretty well. We're not seeing like incredible growth like we saw in 2020. But if you look at like Google Trends or anything, which I do semi-regularly, like golf interest is actually up year on year. So, I'd say it's been a good 18 months to be in the golf business. And, even anecdotally, like I see that with my friends, like people that never played golf before, or, getting into it and going out and realizing like you don't need to be a super stud to get out there. And so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see the stats because like thinking about like MLB, right, in baseball. I foresee, and I'm on this bandwagon, and obviously the MLB will disagree with me, that the younger generation is not getting into baseball like the older generation, right? Just takes too long. Games start in the middle of the day. There's 180 of them, like so many things, right? But with golf, do you guys see younger generations continuing to push on and play?
So for some context, I just started at Summit in January 2020, and my understanding was that there was a feeling that golf was sort of fading, and people had like a very specific concept of who was a golfer and who wasn't a golfer.
Yeah.
Like from a personality perspective. But I think, this past year gave people a chance to do it. So I think it's totally reinvigorated the sport.
That's cool. So, talking about e-commerce, and obviously we've seen some massive growth across the board in e-commerce, especially e-commerce as a percentage of total retail sales since the beginning of the pandemic. But as an e-commerce director, what would you say your philosophy is?
Yeah, so I'd say my overarching philosophy is to keep it pretty simple and not get bogged down in, like tracking 150 acronyms. I basically, and I look at this with my C-suite every week, basically only track three things, and that's traffic, conversion rate, and average order value. Because, basically if you're getting someone to your site, you're getting that person to buy, and you're getting them to buy more shit, you're going to have a growing business. And the story I like to tell about that is I started in e-commerce in 2013, and basically like didn't have any idea what I was doing. I didn't study marketing or e-com or digital or anything. And my first role had been at a really traditional advertising agency. So I was out there just like grinding away, answering customer service emails and phone calls, like doing like site merchandising, doing creating products, dealing with fulfillment and logistics like nonstop. So I was putting in like 10-hour days, and the e-commerce business wasn't growing. And I was like, well, this kind of sucks. Like I'm killing myself, and I'm not seeing any results. So, I guess like somehow through osmosis, I'd heard of Google Analytics. And so like I knew that it was like a thing that, and even the name, like I knew there was some insights that could be gleaned from that.
Yeah.
So basically one day I'm looking at our channel breakdown of revenue, and I see that everything, the only way we're driving revenue besides direct, organic, and email is from this pay-per-click site called ShopStyle, which is a fashion aggregator. So I was like, oh, well, shit, like if I can get 5 more websites that send comparable traffic to ShopStyle, then I'll 5x this business. So obviously that's like easier said than done, and there's a cost associated with driving traffic, but I began to sort of look at it through that lens. And so one of the first ways I figured out how to drive additional traffic, this was in 2013, so way before Facebook, and obviously Google existed, but I didn't know anything really about it. I found a similar fashion aggregator called Polyvore, and we started like essentially the same kind of relationship we had with ShopStyle. And so we launched Polyvore, and one day I get home from lunch, back to the office, and to paint a picture, I'm working in an office like the size of a closet, basically, and by myself.
Yeah.
So I sit down at my desk with my salad, and I notice that we've gotten a $1,500 order. And I go and look at the order, and it turns out that the customer had been, had clicked one of our product ads on Polyvore. And not only that, but she checked out with PayPal, which was, a tool that I just added to the site, the ability to check out with PayPal.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but she'd bought a couple of like expensive Nikes that we just put up on the website. And that sort of, was like a light went off, right? So if I'm focusing on traffic, conversion rate, which is the PayPal piece, obviously, and average order value, which is the merchandising piece, I'm going to see results. So almost overnight, like that sort of changed my perspective and way of thinking about it. And I knew that I didn't have to be putting in, 10 to 12 hour days, like grinding away, banging my head against the wall. I could be like sort of more strategic. And over the course of the years, thinking about things with that perspective, I've learned sort of how to be hands on keys operating on any of the traffic channels you could imagine. Obviously, what that's looked like has changed over the years to now being primarily Facebook and Instagram, as well as getting really smart about email marketing and having thinking a lot more about customer experience and on-site experience. So overall the philosophy is to focus on those three factors. Get more people on your site and sell more shit is the overall philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a great philosophy. When you talk about traffic and average order value and conversion rate, what have you seen any trends over like the past 6 months to a year as far as conversion rates concerned? The things that you can do to your site to help move people along through the funnel?
Yeah, so I would say in general, traffic and conversion rate are obviously tied, right? Because the quality of the traffic you drive has a big impact on your conversion rate. So one thing, and I'm sure we'll get into this, that iOS 14 has brought is worse converting traffic from Facebook. So we've had to be a little bit better about getting the site to work as well as possible. So I sort of reluctantly brought on SMS, and that seemed to have a positive effect on both mobile opt-in rates and mobile conversion rates.
Mm-hmm.
On one of my brands, I work with a company called ConvertCart, and we do, essentially one at a time experiments, making small tweaks to one of my sites, fairwayandgreen.com. Use code TRAUB for 50% off your order. Um, sorry. And so, we focus on making minimal improvements there. And then the other thing that I've been sort of obsessed with for basically the past year is site speed. So, we've brought on a partner to essentially build like a headless version of our site that sits on top of our Shopify site, with a focus on site speed and performance. And then, we've also been really focused on on-site search, and improving that experience, and sort of organization, as well as experimenting with landing pages on where we're pushing Facebook traffic. So I just gave you like 100 answers, but the philosophy there is also pretty simple. Like, get the people onto the site where you want them to buy stuff. Make your site functional, that provides minimal barriers. Help them find the stuff they're looking for, and depending on your business and if your margins can afford it, if you're going to goose it along with a discount, like, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world.
So, you brought up headless and talking about headless e-commerce. Do you want to dive into that a little bit more and talk about like the benefits of why you guys are thinking about going that route? So
I am definitely not as well versed technically as I should be on this. So I'm going to say this in probably in a very unsophisticated way, but essentially the way Shopify delivers the content of your website, all the stuff that's not like involved in like the cart and checkout, is sort of, and this may be changing with like the new Shopify product launch that seems to be, that they announced this several weeks ago, but the Shopify like content management is sort of out of the box, kind of slow. So we are looking to deliver, that site content faster. And it seems like we can do that dramatically with Contentful. And we're working with sort of like a quasi agency software tool. I don't know exactly how you define it, to help sort of implement that process. And then my other understanding is that, site speed is continuing to become more and more important from an SEO perspective. So there's sort of a tangential benefit there.
Yeah, and I'm on the same page as you. As much as I've researched what headless is.
Same. I read about it constantly, and I'm never like left with a better way to describe it than sort of what I just did.
Yeah,
because
it's semi-abstract. I think the idea is traditionally, and what I mean by traditionally is the past few years with Shopify and other sites, there's X amount of steps it takes before someone can make a purchase. So how could we speed that up? Well, we can speed it up by cutting out a lot of the BS, right? A lot of the noise, the steps, total number of steps it takes, reduce friction, right? Because reducing friction increases speed for someone's purchase, and that equals convenience, which equals best customer service, and so on and so forth. So how can you do that? Well, I think that's what headless is in a sense. Granted, I don't know if it'll work for everyone.
Yeah, so I agree that conceptually, that is my understanding of it as well. However, I'm like, okay, cool, show me a headless site. And it basically is just like the same as a regular site.
Yeah. I did the same thing, was looking for headless sites. I came across one, it just seemed like a wholesale site. It's like, okay. So yeah, I have no clue either. Apparently it's the new thing though. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, so I tend to like shy away from, like sort of reflexively reject something that's supposedly the new thing if I can't like wrap my head around it. But the idea of improving my site performance, you know, was a simple enough way for me to understand that.
Yeah. Well, and leave it to marketers to come up with a name that describes something in the worst way. But
Because
getting,
am I check me if I'm wrong, but like the
yeah.
way like sometimes people talk about it abstractly, it's like you could be shopping on this site from your fridge or something. Like, it's untethered to.
Yeah. The idea is to speed up the process in which someone buys a product, right? So you could do it from Alexa. I guess that would be the best way to describe it. Like Alexa, you go on there and you just say, "Hey Alexa, buy this," right? So very similarly, how could you do that through just a website without someone having to talk to Alexa to do it? It'd be like you find the product, you just say buy now. In a sense,
Yeah.
you're not going through like add to cart, add payment info, add shipping info, go through the payment process. Okay, purchased, you're done, right? That's 4 or 5 steps right there. Can you reduce that to 1?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how I see it. But what gets you confused is you think headless. Okay, what does that mean? We're cutting off the head of what? It's not too sure. So someone out there is smarter than us can figure it out. But talking more about going back to iOS, the iOS changes that have really picked up over the past 2 months since the iOS 14.6 update. I think we're at like 82.8% of iOS users have updated to the latest update. With that, I don't know the particulars as far as like what percentage, but basically you're probably around 80 to 85% of people have opted out of being tracked on, like, say, social media. Opted out meaning that their Facebook can no longer track them. And so as far as that traffic piece and talking about that, how we push traffic, obviously Facebook and Google have been like the number 2, 1 and 2, and then Amazon comes in, Walmart, but that's a tad different and how those get worked. But what have been some of the biggest issues you've been dealing with as far as the iOS changes?
Yeah, so it's been relatively dramatic. I think when I first sort of started hearing about it last year, I maybe initially thought it was going to just be a reporting issue.
Mm-hmm.
Like there would be some percentage of sales that were driven by my ads that weren't able to be tracked. And then the more I heard about it, I thought, maybe there'll be an effect on retargeting as well, because Facebook won't have as clear enough data into what people have done, with the ad outside of buy stuff. But I thought that it wouldn't be too dramatic for me because I'm selling like $100 shirts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a huge consideration cycle. So I have friends who work for jewelry companies, and I was like, oh, your shit's about to be fucked up. And so I was expecting some effect, but not a dramatic effect. And then I would say even before the changes rolled out, like I'd say around like 3.1, I saw a pretty dramatic effect on the quality of traffic that was being driven by the ads.
Yeah.
And that is something we are still trying to sort out. I think the other piece that has also had an impact and it's a little opaque to me what percentage of the decrease in Facebook ads effectiveness is related to iOS 14 versus less and more expensive ad inventory with people, not online as much. And, in general, probably shopping online less because they're shopping in store, or like, spending their money on going out to eat or going on vacation. So, I think it's basically a combination of those three things that have caused a pretty noticeable decrease in ads efficiency. And, unlike sort of my expectation, this is not just a reporting issue. I'm seeing it sort of with my daily order volume. So, in the very short term, I think it's going to be sort of hard to deal with. I'm very curious to see how things start to look in the fall, both as Facebook has more time to sort of get learnings on, the type of targeting they can do with the reduced information, and as people are, back in their office more and, fucking around shopping online as opposed to like doing more, as opposed to going on vacation for the first time in 18 months. So I'm curious to see what the fall looks like. This Facebook thing is real, and I think, it's the thing that sort of settles me is I built e-commerce businesses before Facebook ads basically existed. And there's going to be ways to get cheap and quality traffic to the site. And, it's part of this role to identify those and, figure out how to operate in these alternate traffic channels until such time that, Facebook sort of returns to its, to some amount of its previous success. Or if it doesn't, it's something else. Maybe the Chinese government invents a new app that's as addictive as TikTok, and then we can learn how to advertise there. And
well, China will learn. We won't, but no, it's. I don't think Facebook will ever be back to what it previously was.
It won't be like what it was in 2020.
Yeah.
But I think it'll get back to like 2018, 19 levels.
Well, I think this is my personal view on things, but so Apple releases this iOS update, markets it as this privacy thing, right? They care about the people, right? They're out here for us. And what they do is they basically block off the flow of data. And so they control all the data. And I think you saw this with Google too, when at first they were like, why would you do this, Apple? And now they're like, oh yeah, we like privacy too, because Google has the Android and all their users, and they're like, we can control data as well. And then June 30th came around, and now through the aggregated events manager, you can see that Apple is now sending Facebook opt-out data, right? So it's saying they basically came in, made a deal with Facebook saying, for whatever your primary event is set up through AEM, we will now show you that last conversion, just the number. We're not going to give you revenue or anything else, just a purchase. Okay, this is the number of purchases that came out from opt-outs over the past week. So with that, when that happened as well, what you also saw was an increase in CPM, even though people are not spending more money on Facebook, right? Brands are not spending more. In fact, they're either spending less or just getting off of it, pausing it entirely.
Yeah, but I think some of the CPM rise is in relation to the fact that there are less converters on Facebook and Instagram on any given day.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there could be as well. So, well, I guess what I was thinking is,
And also Facebook is worse at identifying converters.
yeah, well, my thought was, okay, well, what if, they have to pay for this? This is their beta test, right? They have to pay Apple, and then the CPM is then that's how they pay for it. At the same time, right, we have all these iOS changes going down. Everyone's out vacationing, right? Like there's no campground or hotel or anything that you can get in 100 miles until October. So you have that. You also have unemployment, which is higher than the average 4% of what any nation can hold. 4%, that's your natural turnover unemployment rate, right? It's at six something, but the bulk of that are your blue collar and service industry folks, right? So there's also a labor shortage, increased prices on everything. You still see people making big purchases on cars and homes that are completely overvalued, but yet they're not making a lot of purchases on smaller items. So there's a lot of shifting things that are happening everywhere that's sort of created this weird storm.
Totally. And then you're comparing it year on year, and that's a whole other can of worms, because you're comparing it to like peak lockdowns when people had nothing to do but buy shit they don't need online.
Yeah, no, we were working with brands that were spending upwards of $1 million a month during lockdown because it was converting. It was doing well. But how I see it is, I'm all for a little bit of chaos, right? It's obviously painful, but as this happens, you increase that barrier to entry. So, and I remember distinctly saying this since like 2016, 2017, having conversations with brands and meeting companies that you're like, I don't even like, you sell what kind of product? What is this? Like, people buy this? Like, no, they don't buy this. And you see them sort of getting by when times are really good. And you're like, there's so many companies out there, which like, we're just sort of getting by when times are great. And you're like, a correction needs to occur at some point in time because this is getting out of hand, right? When you're, I don't know, I could go off and talk another hour about all the different products that I've seen come through that people wanted to push. But so this sort of, maybe it didn't need to happen this way. I do think in general, iOS hurts small business the most.
100%.
Yeah, because you have bigger brands who can continue to spend blindly. I mean, they were spending blindly before. And so it's like, what's the difference now? But I would say to any brand not really understanding what's going on is I would look at your MER, your marketing efficiency rating. So all revenue, all real revenue. So sales minus discounts and freebies and returns. That real revenue divided by total spend across the board, right?
Yeah.
And so that's so what I was gonna say is that's your MER, but what you can do is you can track that every month for the past 2 years, and you can watch and see your trend lines. And does that match what you're spending?
Yeah, the other thing that I've been looking at, and it's essentially getting at the same thing, is looking at the number of new customers I've acquired within any given month and dividing that by my Facebook, Google, and affiliate spend during that month on that brand. Mm-hmm. And going back, like looking back 12 months, so we can sort of see that. And that's essentially the same thing as MER, but it's not, or MER, it's not over counting if you've had like an amazing email or some other big repeat revenue event. So I'm that was traditionally thought of as a CAC, or a customer acquisition cost.
Yeah.
So now I'm really trying to focus in on the number of new visitors that I'm acquiring during a given period. And I think as the data starts to get more and more more and more nebulous, as Google adopts their flock or whatever, focusing on that blended CAC is going to be an important metric. And it also, softens the blow when you look in your Facebook ads manager and you're like, oh shit, I've got a 0.8 ROAS this week, like what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and sticking on that point too, and looking at new visitors and traffic, and are there any new traffic channels that you're excited about or that you see sort of popping up?
Yeah, so obviously that's been a major topic over the past couple of weeks, and couple months. The thing I'd say I'm most excited about, and I don't want to totally screw myself by giving all your savvy listeners the game away. The thing I'm most excited about in the very short term is broadcast. And I think there's a pretty big arbitrage opportunity there. And I also think it presents a sense of scale in the customer's mind, that it often might not be warranted. I think long term, we're going to see, almost back to like what I mentioned at the start of this call, like a 2014 model with like aggregators working on an affiliate basis, in different verticals. And you've seen like the rise of marketplaces, right? Like Amazon, Walmart, and those are somewhat similar to what I'm describing, but I think there's room for sort of more targeted aggregators, like the fashion aggregators I was talking about in 2014. I also, the thing I've wondered is like, why isn't there like obviously I'm focused on golf. Like, why isn't there a daily golf newsletter, like, like of the Skim or something, with product recommendations that's incentivized and monetized on an affiliate basis? So I think there's definitely a space for like a savvy entrepreneurial media person to create a property that I think could suck up some of the spend, particularly if the spend risk for the merchant is backloaded, i.e. they only pay when someone converts.
Yeah. I think it was, so we have agency partners all over, and one of them does traditional, so TV, radio, print. And they were saying, this since the latest iOS changes, that they're actually getting more brands to come over to spend money all the way onto print, which is like the worst, garbage. They're like, yeah, we're really seeing them come back. And it's interesting to me because in theory, yes, your reporting through platforms like Facebook has dwindled. That sucks. But now you're saying that your overall purchase behavior, you perceive to be, they're just not buying things off social media anymore. Therefore, we're going to go back to really what wasn't working before and go towards print. Now, that what I find interesting is take that, and this has been my sort of conversation for about 3 years now. I was like, because we were pushing social media. We have other partners doing TV, and TV was still super expensive. Radio was still super expensive. And I was like, at some point in time, Facebook has become either as expensive or a little more expensive than TV and radio. And that's when it'll come back. And so I think, like you're saying, we're starting to see this fluctuation of all these different mediums sort of come, and people are trying to figure it out.
Right. Like it's a great point. I'm platform agnostic. I don't care if my money goes to Zuckerberg or Jack or like whoever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to get customers to my site the cheapest. So like you said, it's like about identifying where that arbitrage opportunity is, where you can start acquiring customers for less and less. That's why looking at your MER is super important, particularly as you move away from platforms with really concrete channel reporting. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a big opportunity for traditional. Like, I don't understand why all of these traditional media properties aren't going like all in on their affiliate programs. You talk to them and they're like, well, we do a hybrid with a $50,000 flat fee plus 25%, cut on orders that we drive. And it's like, in what world do these numbers make sense? That's why I'm saying, like, if a media property that had legit traffic was like getting it right and offering it to advertisers at a price that made sense, they could be crushing it. But in the short term, it's about figuring out where people are, like, because the one thing that hasn't changed, because Apple started asking people if they want to opt out, is like, there's still a ton of people buying a ton of shit. So you've got to just find them and get them to your site for the least amount of money as possible. And then, once they're in your ecosystem, you gotta figure out a way to convert them.
Yeah, no, it's so looking at, all these different platforms, and like you said, just being completely platform agnostic, but then also looking at referrals. You have all these different groups out there. You have even these CPA networks, which work off of just, if we get a sale, we have a set cost, right? So they pay us X amount per sale. What's interesting is, and this is when I started my agency, this was getting used to how you price, right? Your pricing model, and digital coming from traditional. So traditional used to be, if I worked TV and radio, I would come to you and I'd say, hey, you have $100,000 budget. Cool. We'll buy you $100,000 in media. And you'd be like, well, how much are your fees? Don't worry about it. Like, we got you covered, right? Because what they do is that you give them the 100K, they take 10% off the top, but they report back to you as 100K. Right. So they buy $90,000 worth of media, but they're reporting it as 100. So you move to Facebook, Google, where now the brands own the real estate, and they can see because their credit card gets charged. So you can't do that anymore, right? Or it's very hard, because they started off doing that. Okay, you just percentage of spend, but then people are questioning, like, this is kind of bullshit. It's biased. You're incentivized to spend more even if you're not performing well. So then you have all these other models, flat retainers, to even performance models, which is what we do. And now, as we work, and really, when you look at like what our job has become, from being media buyers to basically we arbitrage a lot of content, right? My whole life is built and revolves around how much content can I get my hands a hold of, and at what cost, because that's driving everything. That's how you tell your stories. That's how you really push the envelope. That's how you can kind of filter that targeted audience. And so now you're sort of seeing the shift, especially with influencers wanting an arm and a leg, especially for like BS posts and whatnot. But you look at referrals and influencers, and the shift in pricing and the shift in across the board. There's massive disruption everywhere, and I think it's good, honestly. I think it's good for brands and agencies, and it'll sort of whittle out the weak and the companies that have just been doing piss poor forever, that have sort of been getting away with it. But that's my personal take anyways.
No, I totally agree. Like, like you said earlier, you're not going to build an Instagram business based on like, marketing like Capricorn t-shirts to people who are born in January. You're going to need to like build a legit business. That's, that can be separate from creating like a brand in the way like, founders sometimes talk about it. But, ultimately, you need to be selling a product that people actually want. Like, you're not going to be able to trick them.
Yeah. Yeah. Product, market, creative, the biggest things.
Yep.
Well, Jonah, hey, I appreciate you coming online and chatting with us today.
Yeah,
Where
my
can
pleasure.
people find and connect with you at?
So I'm on LinkedIn. It's Jonah Redel-Traub, JONAHREDEL-TRAUB. My email is my last name without a hyphen at gmail.com. I'm on Instagram as Jonah the Kid, if you want to like slide my DMs there.
Cool.
And then, I've got my 4 brand sites, which, I'd love anyone to check out. You can find the link to all of them on summitgolfbrands.com. We have some really cool stuff.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely be sure to link to all of them when we push this out. But hey, yeah, so thanks again, Jonah. Thanks for everyone listening in to e-commerce straight talk. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel, subscribe there. You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Play. All right, everyone, take it easy.